So Intel reported their earnings last week, and if you've been following the stock, you notice that this is actually a pretty good dip that the stock took after this earnings report. So let's take a closer look at the earnings report today. Let's take a look at the numbers, see if this dip is justified or if it's just an overreaction. Let's go. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't done so already. But without further ado, let's get into this video and figure out if Intel stock is a buy. So first off, looking at the numbers that Intel reported, they came in here with pretty strong numbers across the board. EPS actually came in at $1.04 a share, topping consensus forecasts or analyst estimates at 96 cents per share, which is also a 44% rise year over year. Then we look at revenue that came in at around 16.96 billion versus 16.77 billion expected, which is a 15% increase year over year. Quarter 3 guidance also came in stronger than expected with an EPS of $1.15 on $18.1 billion in revenue versus an expected analyst estimate of $1.08 on revenue of $17.6 billion. So a fairly good guidance beat there. And then finally, if we look at the full year forecast here for guidance, they came in with an EPS of $4.15 on $69.5 billion in revenue, so they actually raised this. And analysts were expecting around $4.01 on $68.43 billion in revenue. So across the board, all these numbers were beat, all these numbers were strong. Nothing really worrisome here if you're just looking at these numbers in the stock. But now let's take a look at some of the cons that came out from this earnings report and try to figure out and dissect why Intel had such a big drop after this report was released. So the first thing that actually came up as a red flag for some investors was that their number of chips that they sold to data centers came in lower than expected. So even though they sold 27% more this year than the same period last year, analysts were expecting even more sales and that missed. So that's one of the reasons why the stock took a hit. Data centers are known to be very profitable for these type of companies like Intel and AMD. So when you see a less than expected number of sales in this segment of the market, analysts are kind of worried that maybe companies in the data center space aren't purchasing Intel and they're purchasing AMD instead, or maybe this sector as a whole is slowing down. So these are some of the concerns that led to some of the sell-off. The second thing that came out as a red flag from this earnings report was that Intel actually announced that they're going to be delaying their 10 nanometer chips, which were expected to be released in, I believe, early 2019, but now it's pushed to late 2019. So that's another thing that investors saw as issues with the company. Why are they having issues with production? Why are they pushing this out? This is obviously going to affect the profits in the short term. So there was a lot of selling again in the stock for this reason. So now let's talk a little bit about my views and what I think about all of this stuff that came from the earnings report. So like we talked about, they pretty much beat on most of the metrics here. They beat on EPS, they beat on revenue, they beat on guidance for the next quarter, and they beat on guidance for the whole year as well. So in terms of the financials of the company, I'm not too concerned at all with Intel. The biggest drawback in my opinion here is that the number of sales to data centers, the number of chips that they sold to data centers was actually less than what was expected, like I mentioned. So that really kind of scares some investors into thinking that maybe this isn't going to be a sector or a segment of their business that will grow as fast as they expected. But looking at the cold hard facts, we're still up 27% year over year compared to the same period last year in this data center space. So it's still a significant double-digit growth for such a massive company. So in my opinion, I would say that this right here was one of the big overreactions. And now if we look at the second piece of bad news, which was the delay in the chips, yes, that is a bad news. Yes, people were expecting that earlier because that'll drive a lot more profits, a lot more revenue in the company, especially in the short term. But if you're a long-term investor and you don't really care about what happened in the next few months or even the next year or so, if you're looking for something like 3 to 5 years out, this delay doesn't really affect you too much. It's going to be something that's actually welcomed because now investors that are thinking short term will sell off the stock, you get a discount on the stock, you scoop up some shares, and you just hold on to that for the next 3 to 5 years. What I really like though is that Intel still raised their guidance for the next quarter and the next year, even though they are going to be delaying these chips. So that shows that all the segments really in their business are very strong and moving in the right direction. So as an investor looking to invest in Intel, this is something that actually is a huge plus for me personally. Now on top of this, there were actually a couple news articles that came out in the last week or so that makes me even more bullish on the stock and might actually be the tipping factor to why I might put some money and invest into Intel personally. So the first article that came out is that Intel's new i9 9900K chip actually outperforms the AMD rival, which is the Ryzen 7 2700X, by a significant margin. By one of these sites that actually managed to get hold of one of these chips and do some benchmark testing on it, it seems to be a pretty solid performer and kind of blows the AMD competition out of the water here. So again, this is a good sign for an investor, it's a good sign for the company because it shows that Intel is still at the forefront of innovation, they're still at the forefront of performance, and they still want to be the #1 player in this space. The second piece of good news, which makes me again want to invest in this company, is that Intel is actually rumored to be in the new iPhones. So iPhone currently has a contract with Qualcomm, but that's expected to change, that's expected to end, and they're expected to switch over Qualcomm to Intel for the new iPhones. And of course, if this happens and once this is confirmed, this will be huge news for the stock. I expect that this dip that we're recently experiencing, this big gap that we've seen, is actually going to be filled after this news is confirmed by Apple itself, but that's just kind of my prediction and what I'm expecting in the stock. Again, that's just short-term play. I don't really care if it goes up or down in the short term. This is going to be a stock, if I do take a position in it, that I'll hold for quite a while because I think it's a solid performer. They pay a good dividend, so there's not really too much that can go wrong with this stock, in my opinion. Also, on top of that, if this is confirmed by Apple or by Intel, this will actually help Intel a lot because now any concerns that they might miss on future guidance that they provided because of maybe low sales in data center, lower than expected, will be offset by things like the iPhone sales. So that's something to also consider as a new investor or an existing investor in the stock. So overall, in my opinion, I would say that Intel is looking very strong from an investment perspective. The question you got to ask yourself is, does the recent news that's come out over the last few weeks and months really justify a over 16% dip in the stock from its all-time highs? In my opinion, I would say no, and that's because most of the negative news is actually only short-term pain, in my opinion, which will not really have too much of an effect on the stock in the long term. This is also kind of confirmed by them reiterating and kind of raising their guidance for the next quarter and the whole year. And that shows that they're still very bullish on their company and they still expect to perform really well, even though some investors are still skeptical on the company and the stock. So I, for one, see this as a good opportunity in the stock to kind of put myself in there, open up a position, maybe add over the next few weeks or so if the stock still goes lower. And this could end up being a swing play or a longer term hold in my position, depending on how fast the stock recovers. But what I'd really love to hear is your opinion on Intel, and if you have a position in this or if you're thinking of opening up a position in this. Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you want to see a deep dive analysis where I go more into the financials of the company and even the technicals of the company, let me know that in the comment section down below as well. Either way, guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to invest positive.